millions of people losing health insurance means they will use medical care less. That we know that to be true.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate and actual performance may differ. As always, please remember investing involves risk.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Dots here on Tuesday, July 1st. Only 2 more days to go in the week. Chase rolling solo with you today. Zach's out today. I'm going to run through the markets, talk about a little bit about the data we had today and tomorrow. Maybe some bigger picture stuff along the way. But then I want to do a very kind of entry level look into one of the main impacts that looks like we would have out of the current version of the Senate bill, which may or may not end up being law. But there's something in there there's some stuff in there that's a big enough deal that I think could actually have a pretty substantial macro impact from the kind of a sector level and employment level. So we'll dive through that. But of course, first let's go through the markets. Pretty quiet day. You had the S&P down 0.1. NASDAQ down 0.8. You had small cap somehow up 1%. You had equal weight up 1.17. So that was a giant day of outperformance for equal weight, considering that the headline index was down. Mag 7 down 1.5, and that's why equal weight was able to do well, of course. All world ex-US was flat on the day. You had the dollar down 0.12. You're 96.65 is kind of in the level I thought was like right about where you should bottom. So we're kind of right there now for the dollar. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Maybe we just keep slashing down, breaking all this resistance. But if you're going to bounce, this feels like a spot to do it. Oil closed up about 0.7, but still under $66. You have gold up about 1.3, platinum up another 1.8. The rest of the metals didn't do a whole lot. Rates moved a little bit for once on the front end, at least up about 5 basis points, but only up 1 basis point on the 10-year. And as far as like why you had such kind of an ugly day, cap weighted, you had Tesla down 5, you had Microsoft down 1. So especially Tesla kind of weighed on us. You also had Nvidia down about 3%. So finally some top heavy issues kind of hit the market. I guess that's it for the market. As far as data goes, we had jolts come in. That was better than expected. Not only did you have more job openings than we were thinking, but like the quits rate and the hiring rate, those were pretty solid. So better than expected. We also had ISM, manufacturing ISM came in. That was better than expected. Both the ISM and the PMI from S&P for manufacturing, both better than expected. Though I will say in ISM, you had new orders and employment that, they weren't great. So headline better than expected, but not super strong. But that was enough good data to pull yields up a little bit. And we also had Powell talk, which he reiterated kind of what I've been saying, where, if you're going to have this impact from tariffs on inflation, it's more of a like mid to late summer thing. Like it shouldn't have happened yet. I know a lot of people seem to think like, oh, well, those went on in April and it's July now and we haven't had any, so we're not going to have any. But that's not the way the data works. That's not the way the lag works on the pricing and then the collection of the data. So I think you spot on. If you're going to see it's going to be mid to late summer, I think he is definitely in the camp of wanting to wait until you get kind of mid to late summer before you start making moves, just in case we are going to go flying back up to 3% on inflation or something. So we'll see. But tomorrow we have ADP jobs and we have job cuts from Challenger Gray. I think both of those are pretty important right now. ADP has been really weak lately. NFP is such a messed up, weird data set that, does ADP tell you what NFP is going to be? No. but is ADP worth watching closely because it's less wonky data and that probably has a better feed through into real life? I think yes. Like I think it's important for direction, even if it's not going to tell us anything about what happens on Thursday. And then the job cut announcements, those got obviously pretty intense around the time Doge was cutting some government employees. You had an immense spike, but we've actually hung around pretty high levels since. So it's gonna be interesting to see, like, can you come all the way back down to like levels that are just, not worrisome at all? Or does it stay elevated enough to give us, elevated, to use the word again, concern for the broader labor market? And the broad labor market brings me to the thing I kind of want to focus on a little bit today, and this will be a short one, and that's healthcare. I don't think a lot of people realize, but if you go back to all the job gains since COVID, basically a third of those have been healthcare. It's a lot. I mean, it's a big employer to begin with. I think we all know that, but kind of since COVID, it's been a significant net addition of jobs. And as a percent of all the jobs being added, it actually just keeps getting more intense as we go. I think the last jobs printed was 45% of the addition of private sector employment. I mean, that's stratospheric for one sector. And I think one of the things that may end up coming out of this bill, assuming it does become law, and something that heavily resembles the current Senate bill, because it probably has to get changed by the House, but we'll see how it gets changed and when and all that kind of stuff. But if this goes through close to what we're seeing in the Senate right now, the cuts to healthcare, I think, are significant enough to where it can mess with the economy. It can mess with employment, and it can mess with consumer spending. And the reason is these, you're talking like $100 billion a year in Medicaid cuts. Some of that does get phased in later and may well not really happen, as I've alluded to, but some of the outright cuts to, who's eligible, who's not, how often they go back and check for eligibility, work requirements, all this kind of stuff. That stuff hits either instantly or Jan 1, 2026. And given the fact that uninsured, we kind of know millions of people are going to roll off of Medicaid, some by design, some not really, but it's going to happen. And millions of people losing health insurance means they will use medical care less. That we know that to be true. So if less people go to the hospital, less people go to their doctor, obviously that's not good for the finances of hospitals and medical practices. Everyone in that whole ecosystem suffers by less people going to get care. Obviously that could lead to job cuts for hospitals, for doctor staffing, for insurance staffing. Like, kind of the whole ecosystem probably sees potential job cuts from that, losing $100 billion a year roughly in spending.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate, and actual performance may differ.
And the other thing, and this was something I wasn't tracking very well until lately, and this is why it's important to kind of dig in and look at legislation along the way. And I still have a lot of work to do to like really catch myself up on this bill. As soon as it looks like, oh, it's definitely passing, I'm going to deep dive it. It's going to be a ugly week of work, but that's what it takes. But one of the things that is concerning to me is I didn't fully understand is what's going to happen to just the Obamacare exchanges. And this is important because the average person is going to get their healthcare from Medicare, Medicaid, or the exchanges, the ACA exchanges, Obamacare exchanges. And there's a bunch of subsidies on that. So the average person on the ACA exchange gets pretty nice little subsidies. And that is going to be reduced in a meaningful way from this legislation. And obviously, if an average person has their health insurance cost reset higher by a significant amount, then, there's people that are paying $600 a month that are going to have to pay $1,200 a month, $1,500 a month. Like that is going to be an outcome of this bill. And that you can definitely argue is good from like a budget standpoint. Like we have to cut something. Why not that? But from a, household spending standpoint, if, a family has to allocate, an additional $500 to their health insurance, and they didn't get a big raise or whatever, like, they're already kind of paycheck to paycheck. Like this is a big deal. Like this could absolutely hit consumption, even at the like macro countrywide level. So I think it's worth thinking about, as 2026 kind of gets underway. But I'll read through a little bit of what just cursory research I did looking into this to try and get a feel for what this was going to look like. The current reconciliation bill cuts these subsidies. There's multiple provisions in both versions, House and Senate, that would reduce federal spending on the marketplace subsidies and make coverage less affordable. Federal spending on financial assistance for the ACA marketplace would decrease by about $30 billion a year over 10 years. It would increase the percentage of income enrollees must pay in premiums. Would allow for plans to cover a smaller share of costs, healthcare costs, making coverage less generous and more expensive for consumers. So again, just kind of more out-of-pocket expense for the consumer side, which just means less consumption of other things. Net. Both versions of the bill do not extend the enhanced tax credits for marketplace coverage that are set to expire at the end of this year. So this is a big deal. So currently, like I've been making fun of lately, like you have all these sunsets that happen in legislation. So often they never set, right? It's kind of like a poison pill, will get re-upped eventually. Like the whole reason we're doing this reconciliation bill was because there were big tax cuts that were going to expire. So they had a big sunset, right? Well, they're not going to sunset. We're going to keep tax cuts. But sometimes these things actually do sunset. In this case, in between the two parties, they have their own priorities. So sometimes they'll let the other side's priority lapse. Maybe just not any of theirs, right? So you're seeing that with some of the tax credits for green stuff. Like that stuff's going to go away. But also so is the subsidies for health insurance. So both House and Senate bills don't extend these tax credits for this marketplace coverage. That will expire at the end of the year. That you're talking about $26.1 billion reduction in just in 2026 alone. And that's just straight out of essentially Americans' pockets. If you really think about it, 26 billion is not nothing. Plus it could lead to another 4 million people being uninsured over like the next decade. But even if a few people fall off insurance, year 1, year 2 or whatever, they're going to get less care than they used to. Again, that could cost jobs in other ways. Plus just slashing Medicaid spending in general. There's so many middlemen in that system between the federal government, the state government, the providers, and the users of the insurance that I would argue there's probably a less need for all of those middlemen. So I think you could lose middlemen jobs and care providing jobs and insurance jobs. Like the whole stack could lose a few jobs. And it just, if that were to, on its own, that could be a big deal. But if you pair that with kind of some of the cyclical problems we have in places like housing, if you have construction jobs rolling over, government jobs not doing well for obvious reasons, and like all of a sudden, like the medical care jobs, like you're talking 3 monster impacts on positive job gains for the last 5 years, flipping to negative or at least flat or whatever. And that it's just a big problem. It could be enough to create a recession. And again, the reason I bring this up is I don't think anyone's thinking about it. And it is important to say, like, hey, this increases the deficit, which is itself stimulus. So, this is a two-sided coin. It's not like this is just bad or recessionary stuff, like increasing child tax credit, not taxing tips. And like this stuff those are net positives for households, for consumers. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think a lot of people are highlighting the good, on what it can do for the economy and what it can do for Wall Street. But there are some things people aren't talking about that they may not even know about in the bill, that where those few cuts do lie, that could become their own cyclical problem. And if I think if healthcare accounted for 5%, 10% of the job gains in the last few years instead of a third of them, half lately almost, like I just wouldn't. This wouldn't rise to the level of like something that should be on our radar from a macro level. But because this has been such a huge portion of driving job gains, I think this does rise to that level. The Senate bill would limit eligibility for the ACA marketplace coverage to lawfully present immigrants who are lawful permanent residents, further restricting access and subsidies. So there was a lot of ways. It's funny. The House was like worried that the Senate would, a bunch of rhinos in the Senate would like water stuff down, and they actually took some of the more populist measures and they actually expanded them, made them more intense. Now they also spent a bunch of money and didn't, leave in other cuts, but they hit Medicaid pretty hard, and I don't think a lot of people thought they were going to do that. So it's worth noting. All these changes are projected to increase the number of uninsured Americans by 10.9 million over time. That's the CBO's baseline. And then even greater coverage losses if the enhanced tax credits are not renewed. And at the moment, they're not going to be. So again, you're going to have a good bit of people losing care. People without care, they go less. Hospitals don't run on really nice margins. And there's a reason they actually have like a bailout feature sort of thing for rural hospitals, where they're going to put in a few $1 billion to bail out some rural hospitals because they know this is going to hit them. There's no doubt that it will. But, it's not just rural hospitals. Like all hospitals will have margin problems from more uninsured people coming in for care. And margin problems when it comes to a financialized economy equals job losses. So I think starting, call it February, March of 2026, it is going to become time to like start really watching these healthcare jobs, because they could become an issue. They could go from being, a big net positive to a net negative on employment countrywide. So just an idea, just something to think about. I don't think too many people are sniffing around this right now. And if there's one thing I can promise you, it's that there are going to be 10, 20 other things in the bill that people aren't sniffing around yet, that are going to matter for markets, both good and bad. There's going to be things in there, big subsidies, that are going to be great for some sectors that no one cares about. And there's going to be stuff like this where there's going to be hits that cost people jobs that hit at a macro level on spending for consumers. So over time, my goal is to keep kind of unearthing some of the stuff that I don't think people are thinking too deeply about inside the bill. Obviously, we're all thinking about, well, tax cuts are good and, things like that. But you dig up under the hood, and there's going to be some people losing subsidies. They're going to get hurt. People gaining subsidies are going to get helped. You name it. But that's it. All I have for today. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Don't forget, you can download and subscribe at knowyourriskpodcast.com. And don't forget, we're on every social media platform, we're pretty sure, except LinkedIn. So you can probably find us everywhere. YouTube's the best place probably to check us out, but we're everywhere else as well. Back with more tomorrow. Have a good one. Cheers.
Investment advice cannot be given without a client service agreement. Zach Abraham is an investment advisor representative of Trek Financial, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Bulwark Capital Management is a marketing name only and does not carry a separate registration.